And when you think back in Ermita, for example, there was an old building on Rojas Boulevard. It was called Chateau Marie. It was a two-story, very nice, turning century, I mean 19th to 20th century building, with also the antique shops there, and it was just two-story. It looks like a little Casa, that's why it's called Chateau Marie. And it was demolished mid-90s, and there it's now a 58-story building. Why it was demolished? Because of course it was a big land. First, it's a profitable thing to build a condo. But I think the bigger problem was, I talked to the people who were in charge, and they said it's just impossible to get out of a building with only few units to rent it out, and this actually for a not so high price, to pay all the taxes. So, in my opinion, what some foreign countries are doing is that, let's say, they put buildings under national heritage. And if you're building it under national heritage, you become, from the government, the support, let's say, reduced taxes, or tax-free. The building is, for example, tax-free, but you need to promise to keep the building in the old structure and to keep it renovated. So this might be a possibility, because anyway, I think there are not so many old people left after the Second World War. It's just sad when you drive around. I mean, in Intramuros, we have good news, but there are some other buildings like the Baco Station. I mean, it's so sad. The Baco Station is beautiful. It got demolished, and then the project next to the Baco Station didn't push through, and now there are some few columns there, that's all. No? Or the Metropolitan Theater. It's also something. I mean, you were such a beautiful Art Nouveau building. There are not so many in whole Asia, that quality, even if it was destroyed in the Second World War, but it was rebuilt from the original plans. So it's like, I think it was finished again in 55 or something. It was destroyed in 1945, 44. I think if, coming back to your first question, or not to your question, why I could bring, what's the reason why I would bring somebody in an, let's say, heritage building for a date. When you grow up with old architecture, then you start to appreciate it. Here, I think, since there are not so many old buildings, I mean, how many people, how many Filipinos, when they're from the province, they went to Intramuros? Maybe when they were kids, as you said, you know, the school kids, they go there. I think when you grow up, you forget about it. You don't remember anymore. So there's not so much contact to the old buildings. And going back to the question, when you renovate it, we are not talking here only about buildings from the early 20th century. I think we should also talk about buildings from the 50s. There are so many beautiful buildings from the 50s in Manila, city of Manila, which have a fantastic structure, also from the construction structure. They are strong buildings. So, and sometimes when I look at great architecture, because the architects, maybe they were more on the optical, also not only on the structure, also on the optical. Now when you see sometimes these middle-class condominiums, I mean, they are mostly built just to sell out the units, and it's really so ugly. And it's really so ugly. And there's no new architecture I'm missing. You know, when every decade or every century has its architecture, every decade has its architecture. Now, this architecture, I don't know, maybe in 100 years all these big buildings will be demolished because they are so ugly. And so what I think we should look at, that also those 50s buildings, which are mostly either apartments or shops or stores or offices, even along Mabini, there are a lot of them, still a lot of them. And there's a little support to renovate them. Somehow, I cannot decide about that. I don't want to be in politics in that way, but I'm sure that's a possibility to find. Especially with the DOT. Going back to the DOT, we had, I mean, it's a different subject, but it's quite interesting. When you ask a taxi driver in Manila, where is the National Museum, he doesn't know. If you ask him where SM is, he knows. Of course. So when we talk about tourism, when you bring tourists are coming here, a lot of tourists are coming here, and I can see really in Mabini, when we talk about Ermita, we always think about red light. There are a lot of tourists there are students, couples. They come to the Philippines, they want to see the country, they stay 2, 3 days, 4 days in Manila, and to give them an opportunity, a possibility to see the culture. The problem is it's very difficult to find as a tourist. You come with a travel guide, and the travel guide informations are sometimes not so well, so there's no museums guide, because I don't know why. The easiest way would be, for example, in the Manila area, to have a museums guide. The National Museum, the Met Museum, the MCAT, the CCP, and then of course Intramuros. The whole Intramuros can be used like a museum, you know, there's St. Augustine Church, there's all this. The tourists, they don't know. They are lost. Sometimes they walk around, they didn't get the information because there's not in the hotels even a folder where you can see. And if you ask really try to ask a taxi driver where the National Museum is. I think 90% they don't know, which is sad. It's a very nice museum. Any other questions?
This is a great initiative, but how do you plan to sustain it? How do you plan to sustain this?
The building?
Yes.
Actually, since we are a commercial gallery on one side, on the other side we work also institutional. So, as a commercial gallery, of course, you need to sell art. As an institutional gallery, you work with museums, you work with other art institutions. And as I said at the beginning, when you have a project like this, at the end of the day, it's a support for contemporary art. And if you have, let's say, break even, then it's already fine. And this works quite well. So we can maintain it that way. Of course, with the support of the owner of the building, because definitely, you know, if you have a building like this and you would rent it out into small units or studio-type apartments, you can create much more money on rent. But there are not so many buildings like that in Manila, so the owner decided, I have really to say thank you to them, to keep it that way and to keep it affordable for us, for a contemporary art space. Yeah. No more questions?
Any more questions? Sir Rudolf won't be here for the Q&A because he has to leave at 3, so this is your last chance to ask him anything.
Thanks. If you come to there.